Even if we don't see the Chicago Bears starters much on Sunday, there are still plenty of key players with a lot at stake in this first preseason game against the Miami Dolphins.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, we're going to preview this Bears' first preseason game against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday, taking a look at the most important players to watch in the game. It might not be a lot of starters, but there's some important backups that are going to play in this game that could end up having real roles and impacts on this team in the regular season that we need to start sussing out a little bit and figuring out who's going to advance in some of these battles, who's going to be a real contributor, and who's somebody who might instead end up on the practice squad or just not even on the team this upcoming season. And that could include some players who I think just need some individual development and maybe a couple of sleepers on this roster that have been standouts so far at training camp practice. Now, we talked on yesterday's podcast about how we're not going to see much of the Bears starters this preseason, maybe a little bit against the Dolphins in this first preseason game. But there's an exception to that with the players that are kind of like fringe starters, the players who we're not sure if he's going to start or not. And those to me are going to be the individually like most important players to watch in this preseason game. I think that starts with the left tackle battle between Braxton Jones and Ozzie Trapilo. That's probably the most unsettled, wide open, and important battle that still needs to shake out throughout the rest of the preseason. And I'll be really curious to see specifically how much Braxton Jones actually plays. Because you would think if this is a truly wide open competition that you might play both offensive tackles a lot and give them each a ton of opportunity to be able to show what they can do. But like Braxton Jones has spent the last few preseasons as an unquestioned starter on this Bears offensive line and hasn't played a ton of preseason snaps, relatively speaking. And so does he come into this preseason as a veteran? Does Ben Johnson kind of say, well, we already know really what Braxton Jones is and isn't, but we know less of what Ozzie Trapilo is and isn't. So is this a case where we see quite a bit more Ozzie Trapilo in the preseason games than Braxton Jones? And if so, what does that say about who's ahead? Because you can kind of see both sides of the conversation here, where on the one hand, it's like if Ozzie Trapilo is playing a lot, then that's a great opportunity for him to show that he's better than Braxton Jones and make some real strides in this battle and be set to kind of take over as that starter. But then on the flip side, you might look at it and say, well, if Braxton Jones isn't playing very much in the preseason, then that feels a little bit like Ozzie Trapilo's behind and having to show off more what he can do to catch up. And kind of vice versa. Like if Braxton Jones ends up playing a lot this preseason, is that a feeling of like, oh, he must be falling behind then if they want to see a bunch of him this preseason? Or do they say, well, he missed all of the offseason up until training camp, so they'd like to get him additional opportunities just to sort of knock some of the rust off and catch up on the things he missed by not being out there for OTAs and mandatory minicamp. So I'm not necessarily sure that we're going to get a definitive answer based on one game of preseason playing time, but I do think how they perform in this preseason game should say a lot. Because presumably the Miami Dolphins aren't going to play their starters a ton either, and so who's ever in there playing against backups needs to absolutely dominate. Right? You need to look like you're far better than the Dolphins' second and third string players that are lining up against you. Like if you're trying to prove to the Bears coaching staff that you deserve to be a starter, starters should be able to outplay backups. Dare I say, dominate backups. Doesn't mean you're not allowed to lose a rep here and there, because even backups in the NFL are good players, and backups rotate in with starters and still, make plays. It's not like it should be perfection, but I do want to see, like, if one or both of these guys ends up playing quite a bit, they should be able to try and separate themselves a little bit from the level of competition that they're facing out there on the field. Same thing is true for me with the cornerbacks in their position battle, Tyreek Stevenson and Nashawn Wright on the other side of the ball. Stevenson's another one of these players who he's been basically, they've sort of had competitions for him, but not really. More or less an unquestioned starter last season. So he barely played at all in the preseason. He played a bit more as a rookie because he was a rookie and competing for a starting job, etc. But like last year, it was like, well, no, they're all in on Stevenson. So he was kind of the veteran that didn't play that much. But now that Nashawn Wright is really pushing him for that number 2 spot, it's the same dynamic, right? And Nashawn Wright is not a rookie by any means, so it's not like the Trapillo thing where it's like, we'll just leave the rookie out there and play him a lot. But if you got 2 guys going head-to-head for one spot, how much do you play each of them? Do they get equal opportunity with the starters because Jalen Johnson's out, and then they sit and you don't see them the rest of the game? Or do you give some extended playing time to Stevenson or to Deshaun Wright to give them more reps to show you what they can do and that they deserve to be that starter opposite Jalen Johnson in this Bears secondary? And again, like, if one of them plays some extended snaps, I'd like to see them dominate backup wide receivers for the Miami Dolphins. Like, it's not as though they're super loaded beyond Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill in Miami. A lot of undrafted free agent, late round pick type players on that Dolphins receiver depth chart. So you should, if you are going to be the starting corner in this Bears defense, I don't want to see a lot of mistakes against, an undrafted free agent rookie or a 7th round pick like Taj Washington or a 6th round pick like Malik Washington. Like, you should, as a starting caliber outside cornerback in the NFL, handle your own against those guys. I'd also like to see a little bit of that, like, level of competition separation from Luther Burden and Colston Loveland. I expect that even though those guys are kind of like starters in this offense, that because they're rookies, we'll see them play a little bit more than the rest of the starters in this game, and also in part because they were injured, just like Braxton Jones, for the majority of the offseason until training camp. And so I would like to see Colston Loveland and Luther Burden look special. That doesn't mean they have to have 10 catches for 150 yards, but you want to see those moments and those traits, right? You want to see, even if Colston Loveland doesn't have the big play, is he outrunning linebackers up the seam? Is he making a guy miss after the catch? Does Luther Burden look hard to tackle? Does he look a step faster than the other players on the field? How well is he creating separation against probably some backup cornerbacks out there? How well is he making guys miss after the catch? Right? I'm not expecting perfect route running right out of the gate. I'm not expecting perfection at all from any of the rookies. But just like, show me that you're a top 10 pick caliber tight end in Colston Loveland, or a first round caliber wide receiver in Luther Burden, where everyone thought he was going to be drafted, and kind of catch up a little bit and say, like, hey, I'm better than playing with these backups because I'm showing you that I'm going to be a really major contributor to the Bears offense in the 2025 season. So those are kind of the main starters I might expect would play longer than the rest of the actual veterans who might only do a drive or two. But you could see some of these other guys linger in a little bit longer because they're in position battles that kind of directly affect the starting lineup. A lot of the other battles are more for backup roles, but some of those backup roles will rotate in and be part of the starting offense at times, or starting defense at times throughout the course of the season. So I want to check in on some of the players who are going to play a bit longer than any of these borderline starters, that we might see these guys for 2-3 quarters of this game as they get extended looks in their backup position battles next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt a little easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. I have the Monarch Money app on my phone, and I check it almost every day because it's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. I used to have to log into my banking app to see my checking account, log into my credit card app to see my spending there, log into a different app for my retirement account, another app for my investments. But with Monarch Money, you can track all of your accounts, your spending, and your investments in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's MONARCH, monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. I've always done fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your 1 millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick things off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues. It's a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where each week the lowest scoring team gets eliminated until there's one team left standing. With the new season right around the corner, now is the time to get your league together and give this new game mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, that's fine. You can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. So while the starters may only play a couple of drives, we're going to see some extended playing time for the second and third stringers throughout the preseason, and that starts against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. And I think that's where some of the most intriguing battles are, that aren't just like battling for who's going to make the team and sit on the bench all year, but like guys who can have real, actual important roles on this Bears roster, like in the regular season. Like, you don't have to look any farther than in the backfield, where, like, of course, DeAndre Swift's the number one running back. We're not going to see much of him. But everybody's keeping close tabs on the ascent of seventh-round rookie Kyle Monangai, who has played himself into more and more second and first team reps at training camp practices, and he's putting Roschon Johnson's spot in jeopardy. Maybe not his roster spot, but his role in the offense as like the true number two back behind DeAndre Swift. And one of the challenges here is that Roschon Johnson is now missing some practice time with a foot injury. And I would imagine that unless that foot injury is truly 100%, then we're probably not going to see him in the preseason game, which just means then more opportunities for Monangai and the rest of the running backs. That, you know, I'm sure if the starters play, Swift will be the starter, but Monangai might be the next running back not named DeAndre Swift to enter this game, and maybe we'll see quite a bit of Kyle Monangai as a result. He could end up getting, 10, 15, 20 carries in a game like this. And the more Monangai continues to impress, even if Roschon Johnson's doing nothing wrong, but now he's just sidelined with a foot injury, like, the more opportunity Monangai can earn in the actual regular season offensive rotation in that backfield. Like, we know Ben Johnson's always used multiple backs across his offenses in Detroit. We'll see exactly what that looks like in Chicago. It's probably not going to be the same kind of arrangement because he's got 3 here instead of like 2 in Detroit. But still, how Kyle Monangai responds as a pass catcher out of the backfield, how he does in pass protection is going to go a long way. When Ben Johnson talks about no block, no rock, that's part of the process there. I think we know Monangai is a tough, physical, shifty runner out of the backfield. He takes on contact really, really well, but like, he's not going to be the starting running back. And so if you're a backup, you got to be a contributor on special teams, which we'll want to see as well. But then B, if you're in on passing downs, you got to be able to catch it. You got to be able to block. You got to be more than just a guy who can carry the ball. And so how Monangai handles that will be fun to watch. How much playing time they give to like Travis Homer in that third string running back battle will be interesting, because there's, an undrafted free agent from last year like Ian Wheeler that showed a lot of promise. There's a current undrafted rookie free agent, although I think Deion Hankins is dealing with a little bit of an injury. I think that's kept him from being a full participant all the time at practice. So there are 6 running backs on this roster. We'll see how many of them actually play in this preseason game, but it should be a big opportunity for Kyle Monangai at the very least. And he's probably like the first of the quote unquote backups that I'm most interested in watching here. I'm also pretty tuned into this backup quarterback battle. Like, We've seen Tyson Bagent make some really nice plays in training camp. He certainly sounds like a guy who wants to be, wants to prepare like a starter, sees himself having a bigger role in the future somewhere in the NFL, even if it's not with the Chicago Bears. And like these preseason games are those opportunities to really actually show what he can do. Like we hope that he doesn't get to play any regular season snaps this upcoming season, that you have Caleb Williams for all 17 games, or maybe garbage time, but like that you hope that's the extent of it. But it's a real open battle for that number 2 spot with Bagent and Case Keenum being obviously the veteran who's a lot more experienced. And you would think that experience and success that Keenum has had throughout his career might give him a leg up. But Case Keenum has played in 4 games over the last 2 seasons. He's attempted 60 passes in the last 2 years. He has not been a active on-field quarterback. And as he's now, 37 years old, he might not be as good as he was a little bit younger in his career. And so is that opportunity for Tyson Bagent. And how they split those reps will be interesting too, right? Veteran versus young guy. I would imagine Ben Johnson doesn't need to see a lot of Case Keenum tape. He knows what Case Keenum can and can't do. So then do we see a lot of Tyson Bagent and then a lot of 4th-string quarterback Austin Reed? And do we not see Keenum much at all? And then just like with Braxton Jones and Ozzie Trapillo, does that mean the veteran is doing well? Or does that mean the rookie's catching up to him? Or if they do play Case Keenum a lot, does that mean Case Keenum's in trouble? Like some of these same themes and ideas apply across multiple position battles. And so the backup quarterback spot for me is another one that I'm going to be really interested. And then the wide receiver rotation. After we get past DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and then we kind of know like Olamide Zaccheaus and Luther Burden are kind of the number 3 and number 4 in some combination there. Like those 4 guys all feel pretty darn set in the receiver rotation on offense. Devin Duvernay probably has a roster spot pretty guaranteed just as the kick returner there. But then between former 4th-round pick Tyler Scott, the veteran free agent they signed this offseason, Miles Boykin, a couple of former undrafted free agent guys like Maurice Alexander and John Jackson and J.P. Richardson, Samari Toure. Like the Bears have some bodies at the bottom of this wide receiver depth chart that are all competing for that number 6 spot. And I would like to think now in year 3 of Tyler Scott's career as a 4th-round pick, you really should be able to stand out against backups. It's not that Tyler Scott needs to look like a starting caliber wide receiver necessarily, but you'd sure like to see him make some plays and look like more than just I don't want to say a wasted draft pick because that seems a little bit too harsh, but right, he's not guaranteed a roster spot right now, and you kind of hope that 4th-round picks can at least stick around for the entirety of their rookie contract, even if it's just as a special teams player. But like we need to see more from Tyler Scott because the Bears have been very clearly bringing in competition for him at the bottom of this wide receiver depth chart. And you never know. You could be one, especially because Devin Duvernay is not much of an offensive, it won't have much of a role in the offense. In theory, his focus will be on special teams primarily. Like this other receiver can be that next man up in the offense and occasionally rotate in there and see some amount of playing time at some point in the regular season. So how they deploy these wide receivers and who can step up and make some plays in these preseason games will go a long way towards shaping who's going to be the actual, number 6 on the depth chart, which sounds like an insignificant spot, but it really is something that can make a difference and can be a key contributor elsewhere on this Chicago Bears roster. I'm really interested in J.P. Richardson as an undrafted rookie free agent who's been one of the real training camp hero standouts of the practices so far, but to really solidify that role and that position, as the hero of the preseason, you got to make some of the big plays in the games, the way we saw Colin Johnson do a bit last preseason, and the way we've seen other Bears receivers in years past. So I want to go through some other names besides just J.P. Richardson that could be, training camp preseason sleeper heroes that will take the next step, as well as a couple other spots on this roster that are really worth paying close attention to on Sunday. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, the Transfusion, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. So whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Because let's be honest, some days on the course or just in regular day-to-day life, you need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And that's where 5-Hour Energy can come in. Even if golf is not your game, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best part of that clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, and it cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. JP Richardson, I think, is the clear frontrunner for that sort of like player you never heard of until training camp started that is becoming a fan favorite. And I suppose Nashawn Wright is kind of a different category here because he's literally competing to start. And that's not quite, it's not quite the same sort of like underdog story that you get behind. But a couple of other names that are worth keeping an eye on in this category. I really want to see undrafted rookie free agent defensive back Tysheem Johnson. He played some slot, some safety, some corner. He was kind of a do-it-all player in college at Oregon and jumped around a little bit. But he's only 5'9", 195 pounds smaller. But like, he's very much has some very, very loose similarities to the style of player of Tyrann Mathieu. Again, he's not nearly as good. I'm not trying to say he's Tyrann Mathieu. I'm not trying to say he's going to be as good as Tyrann Mathieu. But like, smaller, versatile defensive back, like that's the Tyrann Mathieu mold. And Dennis Allen coached Tyrann Mathieu in New Orleans. And so like this feels like a player that Dennis Allen could really mold and do some things with. And I don't think Tysheem Johnson is probably going to make the Bears 53-man roster this season, but I think he'd be a really fun player to watch and see if they line him up all over the place or if they try and keep things more vanilla and have him be a little more of like a keep him under wraps, under the radar, just play slot cornerback and we'll stash you on the practice squad this year. A couple of other linemen to pay attention to. Jordan McFadden was a free agent they signed from the Chargers, who's been kind of a swing guard for them, has started a few games in his NFL career. He's kind of subtly worked his way up the depth chart and could be pushing, guys like Ryan Bates, Doug Kramer, Luke Newman to be a backup guard on this 53-man roster. And on the defensive line, last preseason, the Bears traded for Chris Williams from the Cleveland Browns. He played on the team all season long in kind of a smaller role, but he's had a good training camp and he's earned extended reps as a pass rusher on the interior. I want to see him dominate a little bit in the preseason and really reaffirm his roster spot on this team. A couple other battles on defense that I want to circle back to here. Defensive ends. I don't think we'll see a lot of Montez Sweat. I don't think we'll see a lot of Dayo Odeyingbo in this game, but that means a ton of time for 5th-round pick Austin Booker from last year to keep developing, right? A raw defensive end prospect that we want to see flash. We want to see him look like he's better than backup offensive lines across from him. Same thing for Dominique Robinson in the same position battle. Dennis Allen just said on Thursday that Dominique Robinson is still learning the defensive end position, and that feels like a disappointment for a guy in his 3rd season, but he also just switched to defensive end late in his college career. He hasn't really played a lot of defensive end, the way that Montez Sweat's been playing D-line since he was in high school, right? And some of these other guys. Robinson has always been newer to it. He hasn't made the kind of progress that we'd like to see for a developmental guy as a 5th-round pick. But preseason is the time to show us what kind of progress you're making. Because they signed a veteran in Tano Passanio from the Saints. I'd like him to show me a little bit to just give me some confidence in the Bears' number 3 edge rusher to feel like they've got a good enough pass rush rotation behind Sweat and Odeyingbo. And if all 3 of those guys can look better than backup offensive tackles, we can feel a little bit better about the depth at that position going into the regular season. And then the number 3 linebacker battle is still open. It looks like Noah Sewell is kind of the main front runner there and has been getting the majority of those reps as a former 5th-round pick out of Oregon. But they used a 4th-round pick on Ruben Hippolyte this year out of Rutgers, and I'm curious to see how well out of Maryland. And I'm looking forward to seeing how well he can, kind of show that high floor and show everyone that he deserved to be a 4th-round pick and not the undrafted free agent that a lot of draft analysts thought he might be. So that's another area of those guys are kind of battling. I'd like to see Hippolyte really look the part of a 4th-round pick and not a guy who looks more like undrafted free agents playing with backups out there on the field. Because for some of these guys, I'm not sure that like the roster spot is in danger, but more so like we want to see how some of these players are just developing. Like show us that you've gotten better and that you look better. Like Karan Amagaji is a perfect example of this. He's someone I'll be watching closely against the Dolphins. I suppose Amagaji's been dealing with an injury, so he might not play against the Dolphins. I should preface that. But if he does play, he's someone who's not in jeopardy of getting cut, but we want to see the kind of progress he's made now a year into this process. He got a lot of extra time while Braxton Jones was injured. Let's see what kind of, is he looking more like a guy who could fill in and start if you needed him to, or is he still a backup that has a lot of work to still do in order to get up to speed to being an NFL left tackle? Same thing on the defensive line with Zach Pickens. Like it's year 3. He's been underwhelming for 2 seasons. I've been trying to preach patience for defensive tackles in particular. That's just a spot that takes longer for guys to develop in the NFL and adapt to the pro game. But at some point, as a 3rd-round pick, you expect some results. And if he looks like kind of just a guy playing with some backups and looks like a backup player, like I'm still not convinced the Bears will just outright cut him entering year 3. But if he struggles, maybe, I'm trying to give him some benefit of the doubt and some real patience for a player that I think has a lot of skill and a lot of talent and a lot of upside. But the pressure's on. It's go time. And I want to see Zach Pickens look better than he's looked the last couple of seasons. And then one other rookie I'd like to keep some close tabs on, because we should mention Shamar Turner is going to be dealing with an injury. He's not going to play. Zay Frazier's been away from the team with a personal issue. He's not going to play. So the other rookie that we haven't really talked about is Luke Newman, the 6th-round rookie at left guard. Presumably right now on the Bears offensive line on the interior, Ryan Bates is going to be your top backup at pretty much any of those spots, right? If any of your left guard, center, or right guard goes down, Bates is probably the first name off the bench anywhere in there. But I'd like to have a little bit more confidence in the rest of the interior depth of this Bears offensive line. And a 6th-round rookie doesn't necessarily automatically give me confidence, right? I want to see him look like does he look like a guy who in a pinch could take the field in a regular season game and not completely drown? Or will he look more like, Karan Amagaji did last year when he got thrown out there? I want to see what Luke Newman can do right away as a rookie to give me a sense of like how deep the Bears actually are on the offensive line, or if it's Ryan Bates and a whole bunch of question marks that you're worried about your depth beyond that point. Because even Ryan Bates is a little bit of a question mark still on the offensive line. And there's another guy. I would like to see how Ryan Bates go out there and dominate. Ryan Bates is supposed to be viewed as like a borderline starting caliber player on the interior. Ryan Poles traded a 5th-round pick for him, thinking he would be a really valuable top backup who could potentially start. I'd like him to look better than all the other backups if he's going to be that guy. Just because he is a veteran, I wonder if he'll play a lot less and kind of be treated a little bit like a starter in that regard, because they just rather play younger, newer players. So that means, Doug Kramer and Luke Newman and Bill Murray, if he's healthy, can all be in there and playing a bit more, because maybe you just don't need to see as much from Ryan Bates because you know what he is and what he isn't. But if he does play, I'd like to see him separate himself from the pack just a little bit more. However these guys do on Sunday, you can be sure we're going to break it down for you right here on Locked On Bears, including going live right after the game is done, about 3 o'clock, 3:30 Central Time on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, the Bears Squad Show with me and Joe George and a rotating cast of guests. We're going to be live after Bears Dolphins to break down everything we saw in the game. So make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts. Or if you listen to the audio form, that's great too. We love you just as much. Just hit the subscribe button on your podcast listening app of choice to keep up with our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today, and hopefully every single day. If you're looking for a second listen today, you can check out any of our wonderful Locked On Podcast Network podcasts for all of your favorite teams, covering all the NBA teams, MLB teams, NHL teams, and a bunch of college programs across the country. We've got another Locked On podcast for you, so go make another Locked On show your second listen today. Coming back on Monday, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.